This coming year, 2025, is an election year, and the polls are coming out and they're saying things are bad for the Labor Party. Both in New South Wales and Victoria, Labor has dropped in the latest opinion polls, swung strongly against Labor in the battleground state of Western Australia. The trend has cut the government's primary vote from 33% to 29% in both New South Wales and Victoria since the last election, putting Labor on course for a defeat in key electorates unless it stages a dramatic turnaround next year. Victorian voters have lifted the coalition's primary vote from 33 to 38%. New South Wales voters have increased their coalition support 37 to 38%. And it seems to me that this business of having someone strong in government, what we've been talking about to do with Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump and Jimmy Carter, could apply here. I mean, are Australians looking at Anthony Albanese and saying we want a stronger leader?
I don't think so.
Really?
No, shocker. Can you believe it? But I mean, I look at some of the statistics, like Victoria, for example, and I think have people not learnt? I mean, it honestly shocks me. I'm not one that would, run with a conspiracy and believe it to be true. But I can't believe that these votes, the last election, they voted Dan Andrews back after what he did during COVID. And I thought, how does this happen?
The Liberal Party in Victoria was a mess. There was not an electable opposition.
Yeah, but look, I honestly think that the Liberal Party in Victoria have done themselves no favours, unfortunately, especially with what they've done with Moira. And I wonder whether perhaps that's why Victoria is different to the other states, because, to be honest, what they did to her was truly deplorable. Yeah, so maybe that's why that state stands differently to other states who are perhaps swinging more towards Liberal.
Let's come back to Victoria in just a moment, because they've got a new state leader. But I'm thinking in terms of whether we need strong leaders. And I had a Liberal Party executive member say to me the other day, he said, Kel, what we need is a Liberal Party campaign that says what Australia needs is leadership, what Australia needs is Dutton. Is that the way the country is flowing?
I think there's a couple of points here. I think the first thing is it is absolutely without question that the quality of political leadership across the Western world is not where it was in the time of Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan. I think we have seen a shift, and it's been a shift for the worse. Dutton incoming is certainly no Ronald Reagan. He's stronger and he's a better option in a two-party system than Albanese is. But I don't think he's necessarily the long-term answer for Australia. The other thing that I would say is, unfortunately, because there isn't a very strong alternative, we are facing minority government in this country, and that will be an absolute unmitigated disaster after seeing the lack of results the last time we had a minority government.
The thing is, we have good options here in Australia. The problem is they're not in the positions where they can take power. I think Alec Antic would be an incredible Prime Minister. He's not in the right. He'd have to change positions.
No, I know that, but why aren't the best people rising to the top?
Well, that's the good question, because like you said, I don't, out of Albanese and Dutton, absolutely I would vote Dutton, before Albanese. But that being said, there are better options. And I think we need to start having conversations about shifting things for the better and having a real change. I mean, I look at America and I'm inspired, and I'm like, oh, thank goodness that there's, Trump's back in. And I don't, I honestly hope JD Vance is VP gets elected after him. I think he would be great. He's a young, strong man. Who I think people would like to follow. And I look at that and think, gosh, I wish we had something like that in Australia, new blood.
But politics is the art of the possible. So bring it back home, realistically.
Well, Antic is possible. That's a great
not
option.
In 2025. He can't become Prime Minister. We need to work out where we're going and what the polls are telling us. And you were saying, and most commentators are saying the same thing, the poll numbers that I read out a moment ago indicate there'll be a minority government. And that might mean a Labor government supported by Greens and Teals. And you turn a sort of shade of pale when I mention that sort of possibility. It's not attractive. I wonder if those polls are right. The American polls got it wrong. They said it was on a knife edge, razor sharp, and no one could pick the winner. And in fact, Trump came in a landslide. And my guess is there are a lot of people out there the polls are not measuring. The people who are saying, no, I won't take part in a poll, and they're people who might actually give Dutton government comfortably.
Yeah, I think that may be right, and I'll break the fourth wall here, ladies and gentlemen. I know after speaking off camera that you said that having a minority government may not necessarily be a bad thing, Kel, and I just think that is absolutely bonkers. It leads to fragmentation, it leads to nothing getting done, it leads to squabbling. I can't understand how you could possibly think that minority government could be in any way a good thing for this country.
I don't think I said that. Did I actually say? I don't think I said that. No.
No, I just thrown you under the bus.
I remain convinced that Dutton is going to win comfortably. I shouldn't be saying things like this.
He should win
this
comfortably.
Really putting my kidneys on the line, isn't it, here? But I think it's looking at these numbers, if that's what the pollsters are finding, I think there's a margin the pollsters are not finding who could give Dutton a comfortable win. Mind you, Albanese says he's not thrown by the polls. As far as he's concerned, they're perfectly OK. Here's what he had to say to the Australian people.
What I'm worried about is helping fellow Australians. I've been underestimated my whole political life, and I'm focused on making a difference for costs of living, on making a difference for plans that we have going forward.
I'm assuming that raised in a housing commission came up just after that and we didn't have quite time to extend out the clip.
He says, Will, that he is being underestimated. Is he?
I think I read in the Herald the other day that Albanese is the master tactician, and I just haven't seen much evidence of it in this first term, with the Voice being the obvious example of an incredible political catastrophe. He may be able to pull something out. And look, he's been in politics since, 96? And it does take a fair bit to be able to keep your seat over that time. But I haven't seen much evidence of the master tactician. No.
In fact, he looks much more like someone who just can't read the room and doesn't know where most Australians are.
I think, evidence shows, particularly with his Voice, referendum, that he can't read the room. He's out of touch with the Australian people. But, yeah, I honestly think at this point in time, it's Dutton's election to lose. I believe that. And like you said, Will, I don't think that Albanese's given us a single reason to think that we are underestimating him. I think that the only problem we'll have is if Liberal don't step up, because at the moment we really need a proper alternative to Labor and not Labor light.
Yeah, I agree. So, I think if we're talking about anyone being underestimated, I still think in quiet corners of Marrickville and Greenie areas that they're underestimating Peter Dutton. I'm fascinated by the myth of the socially conservative Liberal leader in this country. They said Howard was unelectable. They said Morrison was unelectable. They said Abbott was unelectable. They keep making this same mistake, and Dutton is in the same mould. And I just sense they may still be making the same mistake today because they can't get their head around someone like that being in a position of power.
You're right. I mean, right at the beginning of the Albanese period, they enjoyed portraying Dutton as being unelectable. But they've had to pull back from that because of the disastrous loss in the Voice and the fact that Dutton keeps scoring points. Yeah. And when he proposes nuclear power, people keep saying, oh, that's interesting, that's worth thinking about. Yeah, talk about that some more.
Yeah, I think you're right. Still, in their heart of hearts, I just don't think they could possibly get their head around a Christian Conservative being in that position. But look, we will see.
OK.